r/Nosleep. Posted by u/JlaGoodwin 1990. Don't go swimming at Sunset Bay after the sun goes down. Okay, so let me just say right off the bat that I don't give a damn if anyone believes this or not. My intention with this post isn't to make anyone believe me, but simply to read my story and hear the warning I have to give. And then pray to God that those who do, heed it. My friends and I knew the rules about going swimming there at night, and we didn't listen to them. And now, they're gone. Charleston, Oregon is where I call home. A small, unincorporated community that pretty much relies on the much larger town of Coos Bay to the north for police and other services. The biggest draws of it are the University of Oregon's Institute for Marine Biology and its Marine Life Center, the deep-sea fishing charters, and the shops and restaurants which are seemingly frozen in the 1950s and 60s. That's where the three of us were, sitting in the Sea Basket restaurant a week and a half ago having lunch when one of my two friends dropped the idea on us. "So, either of you got any plans for the weekend?" Bobby, the oldest of our trio, asked as he shoved a handful of fries into his mouth. I'd been in the middle of taking a bite of the fried haddock I'd ordered when he'd spoken, and I took my time chewing, savoring the fish before swallowing and answering. "Not for me. I've got the weekend off from working at the fish plant, and I was thinking about going up to Pony Village Cinema to catch a movie with Nikki. The new Exorcist movie's still in theaters, and Five Nights at Freddy's comes out on Friday." Bobby swung his gaze over to Justin, who took a sip of his soda before brushing the dirty blonde hair out of his eyes. "After work on Friday? Nothing. Maybe just do some fishing off the pier for a bit." He cocked his head before speaking again. "Why? You got anything going on?" Bobby shook his head. "No, and that's exactly the point, man. The three of just do the same shit over and over every single week. We slave away at work, go home, either to our empty homes or," he gestured to me, "our girlfriends, and then spend the weekends doing the same things. Movies, fishing, golf sometimes, when we can afford to go to Bandon Dunes Seaside. It's the same routine, week in and week out." As he rubbed his eyes, almost overdramatically, I shared a look with Justin. We both could tell that he was building up to something. The man was not one to complain, and when he did, it was usually a facade to build up to something, not quite legal, or dangerous. "Great, what's he got planned?" I wondered. It was answered a moment later as our friend looked up. The all-too-obvious fake annoyance had been replaced by a familiar twinkle in his eyes. One that signaled I'd been right on the money. "So," he began, folding his hands together after grabbing another fry, "what I'm suggesting is, for the weekend before Halloween, we do something a bit different. Something we've never done before. Something pretty damn cool." I raised an eyebrow at him, shaking my head slightly and smirking. "And what, pray tell, is that?" He answered not even a millisecond after the last word had fallen from my mouth. "How about going down to Sunset Bay for a little night swim?" Sunset Bay State Park is the one other draw of tourists to our area. People come year-round to park their RVs at the campground, or in the case of the more diehards, pitch an actual tent to stay a week or so. The single road winds up to the cliffs, which look out onto Cape Argo Lighthouse and the seemingly endless Pacific, and there's a public golf course those who can afford to hit the greens in Bandon can use. And, of course, the bay which gave the park its name, which people congregate to swim in during the summer months. Justin scoffed. "Dude, you are nuts for two reasons. One, it's the tail end of friggin' October. I don't know if you remember science class, but the ocean gets cold as hell now, even with the Indian summer we've had. And second, at night? You remember that it's against the park rules to swim after sundown, right?" Bobby grinned at him. "Since when has that ever stopped us from having a little fun? Remember when we jimmied the lock of the Hall building a few years ago to do some late-night ghost hunting? Or when we slipped into the theater as teenagers to watch Doom back in '05? I wanted to argue, sneaking in to see an R-rated movie at 15 wasn't as big or dangerous as what he was suggesting, but even still, he did have a point. It wasn't the first time we'd bucked authority for a laugh." Justin still looked apprehensive. "But, dude, swimming at night, while admittedly fun in a lake or pool, is a completely different story in the ocean. It's pitch black, and there could be sharks or Humboldt squid that come into the bay. I don't want to meet a pack of those monsters in the ocean at night." He shivered, remembering the YouTube video we watched of them. Bobby laughed, shaking his head. "When was the last time you remember hearing someone report sharks or freaking squid in the bay? 7, 10, 12 years ago? Trust me, it's safe. Besides," he leaned back in the booth, "we're not gonna be in there for long. Just dunk in for 10, 15 minutes and back out again. Just enough time to do something different and fun." I could see the wheels in Justin's head turning, Bobby's words always managed to influence him far more than they did me, and I could see him about to cave. And, sure enough, he threw up his hands a moment later. "Okay, sure, why not?" he said, before smiling a bit himself. "Who the hell knows, maybe it'll actually be fun." Bobby nodded, smiling in victory. I suddenly became aware that the two of them had shifted their gazes onto me. Outside, the dull toot of a fishing boat horn seemed to punctuate the silence that had fallen over the table. "Randy? What about you, dude? You in?" Inside my head, I mentally sighed. The last thing I wanted to do was go plunging into the freezing Pacific at night. Having studied to be a marine biologist before dropping out of school years ago, I was more knowledgeable about what lay beneath the surface more than either of these two dingbats. I knew it wasn't the smartest move to pull. And yet, I knew that if I said no, the two of them would likely get pissy and end up going there on their own anyways. And, regardless of whether they drove me crazy sometimes, they were still my friends, had been since we were kids. If something happens to them, and you're not there, you will never forgive yourself, Randy. You'll beat yourself up for decades. I hated that my thoughts were right. I sighed out loud before asking the question. "What day?" It turned out that Bobby had the idea to go for the swim on Saturday night. While there were some campers in the park currently, it was the slow season, and Saturday night, when most people were out enjoying themselves, meant the slimmest chance of being spotted. I didn't tell either of them that it had been the very day I'd planned on going to the cinema with my girlfriend. I could tell from the looks now adorning both their faces that they were dead set on the day. That meant I had to break the news to Nikki that we would have to move our trip to the movies up to Friday. And, as she is someone who likes to stick to dates, to say that she was a little unhappy with me, would be putting a light coat of metaphorical paint on it. Still, I smoothed things out, and the week seemed to fly by in a blur. Long hours working at the fish processing plant kept my hands busy, as my mind became preoccupied by our upcoming little excursion. Going on the movie date Friday night seemed to help push it away, but as I lay beside Nikki that night, her platinum blonde hair falling into my face as she snuggled up to me, I stared up at the ceiling, unable to sleep as the same thought repeated. What am I getting myself into? For the rest of my life, I will wish that I'd talked them out of going. Before I knew it, Saturday had passed, and the sun began to set in the sky, the blinding white changing to dark hues of red and orange. Getting into my truck, a black Chevy K10 from the early 70s, I drove down to the fishing docks, where Bobby had said we would meet. Parking the truck where I could look out into the bay while I waited, I turned the engine off and reclined back into the bench seat. The loud cries of seagulls overhead filtered into the cab from the half-open window, along with the chugging engines of the last boats coming in from the open sea. I glanced at my watch. 6:23. I sighed. "Where are they?" Bobby said just before sunset they'd get here. Almost as if answering my thoughts, I saw the headlights of Bobby's Pontiac Bonneville snake into the parking lot. They parked next to me, getting out and sliding into the cab of my truck. The three of us had decided it'd be better to go in a single vehicle, so as not to attract attention. Bobby leaned around just in to shoot me a grin. "Well, man? Let's go." The drive took less than 15 minutes to make. After a long, snaking two-lane road which wound past some of the wealthy residents of town's homes, we slid past the large wooden sign which bid us welcome to Sunset Bay State Park. I kept my foot light on the gas. The old Chevy's 350 made a lot of noise when you pushed too hard on the accelerator, and the last thing I wanted was for anyone camping nearby to hear us coming. "There's the parking lot Justin said, pointing." I killed the lights and coasted into it, pulling the truck into a parking space hit a bit by trees. I shut the engine off, and a moment later, the void of silence which had been filled by the rumble of the engine was filled by another sound, the thunder of the waves crashing into the rocks. For about 15 or 20 minutes, we simply sat quietly, making sure no one came down to the beach from their tents or RVs. Then I heard movement from my right. In the darkness of the cab, I couldn't see Bobby's face, but I could tell he was grinning like an idiot by the sound of his voice. "Well, we're here, gentlemen. Let's do it," he said, before the sound of the door handle being pulled came. The whipping wind filled the cab, and I felt Justin scoot across the seat and hop out after him. Taking a second to pull the keys from the ignition, I hid them in the truck's sun visor before grabbing 3 towels I'd stuffed under the seat and hopping out myself. The roar of the wind became even louder, along with the rumble of the crashing waves. I couldn't see much in the dark, but I knew the basic layout of the place. Sunset Bay is set in a sort of U-shape, the mouth leading straight out into the open ocean after filtering around some rocks sticking out of the water. A light suddenly blinded me, and I raised my free hand to protect my eyes. The light lowered, and I now could plainly see the excitement on my two friends' faces. Justin motioned to me. "Dude, sweet. You brought towels." I nodded, handing one to each of them before we walked down to the beach itself. The sand shifted under my feet as we made our way halfway to the water. Then, we put our stuff down. Bobby immediately began pulling his shirt off, dropping the flashlight onto the towel as he fumbled to pull it over his head. Justin was pulling off his sweatpants, revealing swim trunks under them. Looks like he and I had the same idea, I thought. I didn't begin to undress, though. A strange sensation had settled over me, one which made me stand still. I couldn't tell what it was, but it sent a shiver up my spine, one not caused by the wind or the cold. I twisted my head around, looking first towards the edges of the beach, then back towards the darkened shape of my truck. I could faintly see the lights of an RV piercing through the foliage, but nothing else. What the hell? Why does it feel like someone's watching us? I was snapped out of my thoughts as I was pushed lightly. Earth to Randy, "Come on, bro, hurry up and get undressed," Bobby exclaimed quietly, laughing slightly. Shaking my head and trying to ignore the feeling which hadn't abated, I slowly pulled off my shirt and pants before kicking off my sneakers. The cold sand felt both nice and uncomfortable at the same time, if that makes sense. Bobby picked the flashlight back up, wiggling it at me as he slid a loop on the end of it around his wrist. "Okay, this is waterproof, so I'm gonna take it in with us. If you get turned around, look for the light and swim over to me. We're only gonna dip in for about 10 or 15 minutes, that way we don't get so cold we go into shock or anything, alright?" The last sentence he'd directed at Justin, no doubt in return for his concerns he'd rightly had last week. Justin nodded, now seeming to not care about such thoughts being so wrapped up in the excitement. Bobby grinned, and I couldn't help but smile a bit myself. The enthusiasm the two were giving off was proving a bit infectious as my worries drifted away a bit. "Alright, we run for the water on the count of 3, 'kay?" he asked, before holding up a fist. The two of us nodded. He raised a finger. 1 a second. 2 a third. 3. Last one in's a little bitch. As soon as the words had left his mouth, he turned and began sprinting across the beach, the light bouncing around in all directions. Instantly, Justin and I began sprinting after him. The sand slowed our pursuit, and I heard the splashing of the water about 10 feet in front of us. "Holy shit, it's cold." I heard him yell out before a bigger splash came. Justin pulled slightly ahead of me. I was close enough I could see the lapping water against the sand. A moment later, I was splashing into it myself. I suppressed a cry, the water was absolutely freezing against my bare skin. Still, I forced myself to keep dashing in as the water rose higher up my legs. When it reached my knees, I flung myself forwards into the dark water. The shock of the frigid water enveloping me was strong enough that I had to shove down another cry, this one which would have been muffled underwater. Fighting my way to the surface as I felt a swell pass over me, my head broke the water, and I sputtered out. "Freaking hell, it's freezing," I cried out. A few feet to my right and ahead of me, I heard Justin's voice. "That's the damn understatement of the century, dude." The light suddenly fell over us again, coming from about 5 feet ahead. "You're both such pansies, man," Bobby exclaimed, chuckling. Then he motioned to us. "Come on, let's get out a little further." A small wave of trepidation fell over me as I treaded water and bobbed up and down in the swells. It was already deep enough that, even at 6 feet tall, I could barely feel the bottom below my feet. But my friends were already beginning to swim away, the light turning and shining out towards open water. Not wanting to stay alone, especially with the odd feeling still hanging around the very edge of my mind, I forced myself to begin swimming after them. I could feel my body beginning to shake slightly, a sign the cold water was already beginning to take its toll on my exposed skin. "We're not staying in here 20 minutes, hell, not even 15. 10 minutes max, and then I'm getting these two out if I have to tow them back to shore." I followed the light ahead of me, feeling the slight push of the incoming tide attempting to shove me back to shore. The blare of the lighthouse's foghorn sounded, almost painfully loud being so close. Must be a fog bank or something moving in out there, I thought. I could hear Bobby and Justin laughing, heard the splash of water as one of them must have smacked the water to splash the other. I couldn't help but laugh softly. As concerned as I was, in a way, it almost felt like we were kids or teenagers again, not men in their late 20s to mid-30s. Time seemed to have reversed. Maybe Bobby was right. Maybe we did need this. Finally, I caught up with them, and we treaded water in a loose circle. "Dude, this is actually sick as hell," Justin said, smiling as he slicked his hair back. Bobby wiped the seawater out of his eyes with one hand before sharing a high five with him. After a few minutes grinning at each other, I spoke. "So now what? We can only stay in here a bit longer before we get too cold to swim. What are we gonna do in the next few minutes?" I will forever wish that I hadn't opened my mouth. I saw the sly smile cross Bobby's face. The one that signaled he'd thought of something. Oh, crap. He turned and pointed behind him. "How about a race? First one to swim out to parallel the first of the rock fingers wins, then we head back in?" I should have known he'd do this. The rock fingers were a formation of 3 or 4 rocks that led out from the shore, into the waves and beneath the surface. I let out an astonished gasp. "Dude, that's almost to the mouth of the bay. Are you freaking nuts?" The sly smile grew. "What, afraid I'll finally beat you at swimming? Afraid you're too out of shape?" Instantly, I felt my cheeks flush. Bobby knew I was competitive when it came to swimming, having been on the team in school. If I hadn't dropped out, I probably could have gotten a ride to college on a scholarship from it. "Oh, you just earned yourself a damn ass kicking from that remark, man," I said, moving to tread water next to him. "After I whoop your ass to the rock fingers and back," the smile morphed into a grin, and I heard Justin laugh beside me. "Oh, shit, you've been called out, dude." Bobby motioned. "On 3, then?" I nodded. The 3 of us lined up next to each other, the swells lifting and dropping us. As I waited for Bobby to count down, the feeling of being watched I had earlier suddenly returned in spades. The shiver that cascaded down my spine was from far more than the chill of the water, and I twisted around. The shore, now looking quite far away from us, still looked empty in the gloom, as did the cliffs to either side. I cast my eyes down into the water, but it was too dark to see anything below the surface. I shook my head. "Calm down, dude. There's nothing out here. You're just scaring yourself." I suddenly realized Bobby had been counting down as I'd been looking. "Go!" he suddenly yelled out, louder than I liked. His voice echoed off the cliffs, and he dove into the water, coming up in a breaststroke. Justin plunged after him. For half a second, I faltered, then, realizing I still had to beat him for talking smack about me, I powered into the waves, all my muscle memory from being on the swim team returning to me. I came to the surface, moving into a front crawl and sliced through the water. The adrenaline seemed to warm me slightly, and by the flash of the light ahead, I was rapidly pulling even with Bobby. That was when I felt something brush against my right leg. It was quick, only for a nanosecond, but the feeling was enough to get me to pause mid-stroke. After swimming in the ocean for my entire life, I'd had seaweed and other detritus brush against me in the water, and I knew what the feeling of them against my skin was. This was nothing like that. I can't even explain, that's how alien of a feeling it had been. Attempting to resume swimming, I tried to push the unnerved emotion welling up in me away. A moment later, the feeling came again, this time from the foot on my other side. This time, I stopped swimming entirely, moving to tread water. Against my will, my heart had begun to thud in my chest, and I looked around. The water around me remained dark, the only waves aside from the swells being of my own making. What the fuck was that? Ahead of me, I heard Bobby let out a triumphant cry of victory, but I kept turning, looking around in almost every conceivable direction. Mental images of sharks and other horrors swimming towards me in the dark began flooding into my mind, and I felt another shiver, this time of fear course through me. "Randy, what is it?" Justin called out from about 20 feet to my right. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was opening my mouth to answer finally, when I heard my friend let out a yelp. What the hell was that? My heart sped up its pace, and I could hear the pumping of blood in my ears. What man?" I called out, not caring about being quiet anymore. "Dude, something just brushed against my thigh. Something weird, slimy and rough." The biggest shiver yet passed through me. Justin's almost 23 feet away from me. I felt that brush not even a second ago. How fast is whatever we felt? Suddenly, the laughing, sarcastic call of Bobby came from behind us. "What? Did you stop and let me win because a dumb seal or something brushed against you? Are you two really that much of pussies?" I heard the splash of water from behind us. "Oh, help me. A seal's coming to get me," he cried out in a mocking tone. "Bobby, shut the fuck up, dude. There's something in the bay with us." I heard him let out another mocking laugh and smack the water some more. "Oh, no. A sea monster is coming for us. Oh, help me, help me." He laughed, but there was absolutely nothing funny about this situation anymore. We were hundreds of feet from the beach, in dark water, with some kind of animal. Whether it was a shark or some other kind of predator, I didn't know, but this wasn't something to take chances on. We need to get back to shore. Now. Guys, let's move back towards the beach. Nice and calmly I called out, forcing myself not to panic. There's something here, and we can't take the chance. Yeah, sounds like a plan to me, I heard Justin say quietly. But Bobby, being Bobby, wasn't quitting. The light smacked both of us in the face, and he laughed more. You two are fucking pussies. I was joking before, but, fucking hell. I heard him begin smacking the water hard. Oh, Mr. Sea Monster, don't eat me, please. You two always freaking chicken out. Of there was suddenly a huge splash, louder than had come before, and coming from the direction of the light that cut him off mid-sentence. And then it suddenly disappeared. The two of us were suddenly cast into silence and darkness, only the sounds of the surf and the wind reaching my ears. For a second, I waited. Bobby? I called. No response. Bobby, this is not the time to play games, dude. We need to get back to shore. Still no response. Dude, you're not being funny, man. I heard Justin call out. My breath began to come shallow as there was still no answer. And then, the light appeared again. It shone straight into our faces about 10 feet away. Instantly, I felt a wave of anger surge through me. The fuckhead has gone too far, this time. With an animal in here, he decides to fake being attacked and duck under the water, turning off his light. I am actually going to kill him. Wait here, man, I growled to Justin, then kicked forward. I called out to our jackass of a friend as I approached the light. Bobby, I am actually going to drown your stupid A. I suddenly came to a stop, freezing both mid-stroke and mid-sentence as my eyes adjusted to the light. The flashlight bobbed up and down in the water. No longer attached to Bobby's wrist. What the fuck? I looked around, but saw no sign of him in the dark. Then I forced myself to reach out and grab the light. I immediately saw the broken wrist strap, dangling from one end. What the hell just happened? I breathed out. A wave of fear and panic was beginning to surge up through me, my breath going thin and shallow again. I half hoped that he would suddenly pop up in front of me, spitting seawater into my face. But he didn't. A warm feeling suddenly rose up from my legs, and for a moment, I thought I'd accidentally urinated. But, no, this was too much of a warm feeling. I wondered if I was going into shock from the cold. That was when I angled the flashlight down into the water. For a second, my brain didn't register what I was seeing in the beam, why the water looked weird. And then, realization crashed into me. Oh, fuck. I breathed out. I was treading water in a pool of blood. One which had begun seeping up from beneath the surface. From beneath me. Fear and terror like I'd never experienced began coursing through my body as I realized whose blood it had to be, and I felt myself begin to shake slightly. Not from the cold this time, though. Oh, shit. Oh, shit, I kept repeating it, almost mindlessly as the reality of the situation kept slamming into me like a semi-truck. Oh, shit, my mind began racing again after its deadlock, and I forced myself to, as quietly, calmly and smoothly begin to swim backwards. The feeling of being watched suddenly returned with a vengeance, and another wave of fear flashed through me as I finally realized that it was coming from below me as well. I was being observed by something under the water. So, was Bobby playing a trick on us? Came the call from behind me. If I hadn't been hyper-aware and on edge, I would have jumped at the voice of my friend, my remaining friend. Justin. I forced myself to swallow, then managed to speak, my voice coming out hoarse and higher than I'd ever heard it. Justin? For a moment, there was silence, and then he answered, the annoyed tone replaced with the same amount of fear I felt as he heard the tone in my voice. Yeah? I swallowed again. Still swimming slowly backwards, my eyes and the light trained on the red staining the dark water. I suddenly realized that I was giving away my position by holding onto it and released it, letting it float away and off to my left before answering. Start, very slowly, swimming back to shore. Don't ask questions, and don't splash. Just move. I could tell he'd picked up on the gravity of the situation. He knew after so many years that I wouldn't joke about something like this. He simply answered with a single word, one that came out weakly. Okay. I reached him, and together, we began backstroking, moving almost painfully slow to avoid splashing. But we hadn't even gone 10 feet when another splash came from back the way we'd come from. I snapped my head up. My eyes widened as I saw the flashlight had disappeared again. Oh, God. I kept moving, hearing my friend do the same. That's when something smacked into my back. I hardly could contain the scream welling up inside of me. And even more so, when the blinding glare of the flashlight popped to the surface beside me, aimed right in my face. I froze, mid-stroke again as the realization hit me. It's toying with us. Whatever this thing is, and it's not a normal sea creature, it's toying with us. And it's right below us. The light swung in the swells, reflecting off Justin's face. The same look of horror plastered his face as he realized the same thing. That's when the brush came again. This time on my back. I let out a gasp at the alien feeling, now for much longer and more pronounced. Involuntarily, I turned my head and looked down into the dark water. My breath suddenly came in quick, rapid gasps as my eyes widened and locked onto the view beneath me. At what gazed back up at me, from what had to be 20 feet below. An eye. A huge, golden, narrow eye, one which gazed coldly up at me. I whimpered in terror, unable to look away. My life suddenly began flashing in front of my eyes as the realization hit me. I am about to die. The brush came again, and I felt something stick slightly to my back, the skin it attached to stinging. That was when an explosion of movement and sound came from my right. Justin had heard me whimper, and must have turned to look down into the water. I will never know if he saw what I had, but it was enough for him to start plowing into the water, frantically thrashing as he began to scream out. "Help us!" His voice echoed out onto the cliff walls. "Help!" The suction on my back released, and I felt a huge surge of water came from beneath me, moving away. To my left. "Oh, God, no! Justin, stop!" I screamed, realizing with horror what had happened. What was about to happen? But I was already too late. I heard him begin to cry out again. How a sudden splash cut him off, and I swore I heard the start of a scream take its place. Then, silence. One which held the worst connotations to it. I began to cry as I realized that he'd been yanked below the surface. I was alone. I'm honestly not even sure how I made it back to shore alive. Maybe whatever that creature was too busy, I can't bring myself to say it. Maybe it was too full. I'll never know. But the next thing I remember, I was staggering onto the beach. My body shook, both from the cold, and from fear. For a few moments, I simply stared back out at the water. I could almost swear I could see that horrific eye, glaring at me from the depths. But it was probably my imagination. All I know is, I dashed for my truck, snatching up my clothes. I'm ashamed to say, I never called the cops. After all, what could I tell them? That a sea monster attacked and ate my friends? I'd be called insane. Or worse, thanks to the reputation of people on drugs around here, I'd be looked at for their deaths myself. It's not been enough time for them to be declared missing. But I know they will be soon. By their friends and family. I don't know what I'll say if they come to ask me if I know anything. Every single night since then, I've had nothing but nightmares. Nightmares that have woken me up, screaming my head off, Nikki shaking me with a terrified look on her face. Nightmares of being back in Sunset Bay at night, alone. Of swimming far out away from the beach. Of feeling it brush against me again. But this time, not letting go. And being dragged down to be devoured like Bobby and Justin were. They've gotten worse since she took me to the Marine Life Center this past Wednesday. When I looked into the tank containing the octopuses. And saw the golden eye staring coldly up at me. Like I said at the start, I don't give a damn if you believe me or not. I truly don't. But I need to warn you. And please, listen to me. Don't ignore it. If you ever end up on the Oregon coast, and you find yourself down near Charleston, or even staying at the campgrounds nearby, whatever you do not go swimming in Sunset Bay after the sun goes down. Because something calls the bay home at night. Something giant. Something horrifying. Something hungry. Something that is looking for its next meal.